I'm the country director for Westminster Foundation for Democracy. We've been hearing a lot on financing on the care economy, and that's exactly the conversation we will have today. Exactly we could do around the role of Parliament. Paul Raj, the chair of Women in Parliament.
Today, we convene not merely to discuss social welfare, but to redefine a foundational pillar of macroeconomics, the care economy. Across Sri Lanka, millions of women quietly shoulder the immense responsibility to unpaid care work, nurturing our children, attending to our elders, supporting persons with disabilities, and holding families together. This invisible labor is the literal backbone of our society. Yet, because it remains largely unquantified and undersupported, it acts as a structural barrier, limiting women's labor force participation, choking entrepreneurship, and constraining our national economic potential.
We gather here today at a pivotal moment in our national journey to address a fundamental yet historical overlooked driver of sustainable growth, the care economy. For decades, the invisible engine behind our households, communities, and the national workforce has been the relentless care work carried out primarily by women.
Thank you for inviting me to be part of this very important discussion on understanding the role of Parliament in financing the care economy. I really appreciate this initiative taken by our caucus, together with the Westminster Foundation for Democracy in Sri Lanka, to bring this conversation into a space where policy, public finance, and political decision-making come together. The timing of this discussion is particularly important. Sri Lanka is at a point where we are working to consolidate economic stability while also addressing long-standing structural inequalities within our society. Our recovery cannot be measured only through economic indicators. We must also ask what kind of society and economy we are rebuilding. We must think about who is able to participate in that economy, in that society, and who will continue to carry responsibilities that remain largely invisible in our economic and policy frameworks. Care work is central to that conversation. Every society, as we know, depends on care work. Children need to be nurtured and supported. Older persons need care and companionship. Persons with disabilities require different forms of assistance, care, and support. Families and households depend every day on people who cook, clean, organize, do the laundry, and respond to the needs of others. This work sustains our families, our communities, and ultimately our economy. Yet, much of it, as we have discussed often, remains unpaid, undervalued, and largely invisible. And overwhelmingly, this burden of care work invariably falls on women. This has consequences that go far beyond the household. When adequate and affordable care services are unavailable, families have to find their own solutions, and most often when we say families, it's women who have to find their own solutions, our own solutions. In most cases, it is women who adjust their lives. They either reduce their working hours, turn down employment opportunities for promotion, advancement in education, interrupt their careers, sometimes leave the workforce altogether. As a result, women lose income, professional opportunities, economic independence, and also the ability and the space and the time to actively participate in political life, in a social life, in cultural life, and of course, let's not even start talking about the leisure time that women end up having in most situations. We are a country that has talked long and hard about the lack of women's representation in leadership positions, particularly in our parliament. But we have not talked about how unpaid care work and the invisibility of care work has had a profound impact on whether women are able to enter the political space or not, or whether they are even able to take up positions of leadership in any space, whether it's within the political sphere, economic sphere, or any other sphere. This is why we need to stop treating care simply as a private responsibility to be managed within individual households. Care is a social responsibility. It is an economic issue. It is a social issue. It is a political issue. It is ultimately an issue about gender equality, and it is therefore a matter of public policy. As Minister of Education, Higher Education and Vocational Education, this is an issue that I find particularly important. We invest significantly in educating girls and young women, and the traditional notion is when women are educated, we empower them, and miraculously they enter into all kinds of positions and are empowered as a sort of just a very simple causal connection between education and empowerment. But we know that's not true. If we look at our statistics alone, women enter our schools and universities in vast numbers, pursue professional qualifications, and develop valuable knowledge and skills. Yet, we continue to see barriers that prevent many women from participating fully and continuously, whether it's in the economy or in any other sphere. Even when they do participate, we know that they consciously restrict the kinds of opportunities they take up, paths of promotion, career options, because of this burden of care work. If a woman receives an education and enters employment and finds herself forced to choose between her career and caring for a child, an elderly parent, another family member, or a disabled member of your family, very often the woman will put her career, her other life choices, her ambitions secondary and invest, because that is inevitable and that is what is expected of her. And if she doesn't perform those duties, of course we know the consequences that she will have to face. So then we need to ask ourselves whether this is a problem of individuals, of women just not working hard enough, or women not being able to balance their home and work life and everything else, but whether this is a systemic issue. Too often as a society, we expect women to solve this problem privately, or we give women lots of advice on how to balance their work and professional life. This is what we often do, and then we celebrate women who apparently can do it all. I am unfortunately not one of those women who can do it all, and I really, really honestly doubt whether there are any women who can do it all, because we are expecting the impossible if we expect women to do it all. But this is not a problem that individual women can solve alone. If we want more women to participate in all aspects of society, and we want greater autonomy for women to make choices, if we want to make our society truly inclusive, then we must create the social infrastructure that makes this all possible. I want to reiterate that this should not be simply simplified or narrowed down to acknowledging or making sure that care work is not a barrier for women to enter the labor force. I know that this is the dominant argument, that there's a lot of attention on the fact that the participation of women in the labor force is low, and this is picked up as a problem, right? Because it is seen primarily as an economic problem of the fact that half of our workforce is unable to participate, half of our human resources are unable to participate in the workforce, and this gets picked on. It's important. I'm not denying the importance of ensuring that women are able to participate equally in the workforce. But if we bring the whole care work argument, or we reduce it to simply about increasing labor force participation of women, I think we are missing the point. It's much bigger than that. This is a problem of equity. It's a problem of building an inclusive society. It's a problem of justice. Therefore, we need to think differently. If we are to address this issue, we need to think differently about public investment. Investment in care should not be seen simply as an expenditure, a cost. Affordable and accessible childcare, quality early childhood education, better transport, elder care services, support for persons with disabilities, stronger social protection systems across sectors create benefits across society, including the economy, which will have profound benefits for everyone. They can enable more women to enter and remain in employment. They can enable more women to enter cultural spaces, political spaces, take on leadership roles, all of these. They will create new jobs within the care sector. They can improve children's development and educational outcomes. They can provide greater dignity and security for older people. and they can reduce the pressure placed on families, both on women and men. This is where Parliament has a particularly important responsibility. As we know, budgets are not simply financial documents. They reflect our priorities as a country. The decisions we make about where public resources are allocated tell us what we value and what we consider important for our development. Gender-responsive budgeting, therefore, needs to become a meaningful part of our approach to public finance. We need to understand how budget decisions affect women and men differently, and whether public investment is helping to address or reinforce existing inequalities. When we invest in care infrastructure and social protection, we are also investing in women's participation, in women's autonomy, in women's independence. When we provide accessible childcare, we are making it easier for parents, particularly women, to engage fully as citizens. When we strengthen elder care and disability support, we reduce unpaid responsibilities carried by families. When we professionalize care work, we create employment and improve the quality of services available to our citizens. Parliament's responsibility, therefore, is not limited to approving expenditure. It must also examine whether our public spending is producing the social and economic outcomes we need. It must ask who benefits, who remains excluded, and whether our investments are contributing to a fairer distribution of opportunities and responsibilities. We also need better evidence. What we do not measure is too easily ignored. Traditional economic or human development indicators do not adequately capture the enormous contribution of unpaid care and domestic work. Yet, without this work, the formal economy itself could not function as it is. In fact, society itself would cease to function. Often in some of my conversations with women, I have asked women to imagine what would happen if women go on strike for a day. We just stop doing everything. And I really wonder how anything would happen if we just stop. We just stop doing everything. That, in many ways, maybe we need to do that for society to understand the value of what happens, of all this invisible work that is done that carries society. Recognizing the value of unpaid care does not mean placing a price on every act of caring within a family. It means ensuring that policymakers understand its scale, its economic significance, and the unequal burden it places on different groups in society. Better data can help us design better policies, allocate resources more effectively, and evaluate whether our interventions are actually making a difference. This conversation, of course, must also extend to the workplace. Government has a responsibility, but employers also have an important role. Workplace policies that recognize care responsibilities can make an enormous difference to whether people, particularly women, can remain economically active. Flexible and fair working arrangements for all women, not just women in particular top-level positions, but all women, appropriate parental support, and workplaces that recognize the realities of family responsibilities should increasingly become part of how we think about decent work. Ultimately, we must move away from a system in which women are expected to choose between economic advancement, caring for their families, taking on leadership roles, caring for their families, looking after a disabled child, or pursuing a career path. That is, we have to agree, forcing women to make those kinds of choices is manifestly unfair. Parliament has an important role in addressing these systemic barriers through public investment, socio-cultural transformation, supporting socio-cultural transformations, and ensuring that the appropriate legal protections are in place. The care economy should not be treated as a women's issue alone. It concerns all of us. Men have a responsibility to participate equally in care. Employers have a responsibility to create supportive workplaces. Communities have a role in building networks of support. Government has a responsibility to develop appropriate policies and services. and Parliament has a responsibility to ensure that these priorities are reflected in our laws, our budgets, and our national development agenda. If we want a society in which women and men and everyone else can participate equally in political and public life, in economic life, we must also address the unequal distribution of care. If we want to increase women's participation in the labor force, we must address care. If we want to make better use of the education and skills of our population, we must address care. If we want economic development that is genuinely inclusive, we cannot continue to treat the work that sustains our people as invisible. I therefore hope that today's discussion moves us beyond simply recognizing the importance of the care economy towards identifying practical actions that can be taken through Parliament, public finance, education and training, social protection, and workplace policy. And once again, I reiterate, let it not be a conversation that is looking primarily from a very narrow economic lens at increasing women's labor force participation. I would like to acknowledge here the contribution of the diplomatic community, research institutions, our researchers, development partners, academics, and civil society organizations whose research, advocacy, and experience continue to strengthen this conversation. Evidence and dialogue are essential if we are to develop policies that respond to the realities experienced by people in their everyday lives. Investing in the care economy is ultimately an investment in people. It is an investment in women's futures, in the futures of our children, in the dignity of older persons, on persons with disabilities, in stronger families, in stronger communities, and ultimately a more inclusive, just society. Our task is to ensure that care is recognized, valued, and supported, not simply through our words, but through the choices we make in policy and public investment. I hope the discussions today will contribute to practical and achievable steps towards building a care economy that is fairer, more inclusive, and more sustainable, and one and contribute towards a society where no one is forced to choose between caring for people they love and participating fully as a citizen in all spheres of life and in all spheres that are available to us in our society. Thank you very much. I wish you all the very best.
I'm very much interested in how you get this analysis. I mean, even though it is a shame that we have to give numbers to prove something, which is also qualitative, but we need some data. But I would like to have more insight into that conclusion. Thank you.
A question and a follow-up question. The question was really about the numbers that you produced about the return to care and also the employment ratios. And I'm sort of going to answer that question with a question, which is to say, did these come out of a sort of CG modeling kind of approach? And if so?
So all that kind of details, you can go and actually play around there. It's not only done in Sri Lanka, it's across the globe, different countries, also the data on different countries you can access there.
Do a gender audit of the data that are currently collected.
Census department is one thing, but are there other institutions that are more connected to the parliament, for example, like the audit office, which can be used to generate this kind of data?
We had some discussion with our finance minister also. Then this one is the third discussion with you all here. So we hope to go beyond that, and I invite you all to keep in touch with us and to make these researchers and to find there are some outsiders and the developing partners and a women commission also here with us today, and apparel sector workers and other partners also here with us today. So I take this opportunity to share these all ideas here, and we plan to have this type of discussions and to collect these data and find them.
මට අදහස් වශයෙන් කියන්න තියෙන්නේ ඇත්තටම මේ අවස්ථාව අපිව උපයෝගී කරගනිමින් පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ ඉදිරි සැකස්ම වෙනුවෙන් අපේ අදහස් කොහොමද කරගන්න අවස්ථාව ලබා දීම සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඇත්තටම පාර්ලිමේන්තු කාර්යය සංසදයට මගේ ස්තුතිය අපේ වෙළඳ කලාප සේවක සංගමයේ ඉදිරිපත් කරනවා.
Parliamentary and also in our residence and also we are discussing in the president office.
Every day across the country, households undertake domestic care work, cooking, cleaning, childcare, elder care, and so on. And this social reproduction is the groundwork on which all other economic activity is kind of based on. However, this goes invisible and unvalued. We need a timely survey to recognize who produces this domestic work.
The program will provide participating children at a minimum a nutritious lunch and homework support until their parent can pick them up. And when for schools with resources, this program could offer beyond lunch and homework support to accessing skills development, including IT and any other
IoT monitoring, base monitoring. We're talking about robotics transfers, which is what we see in more developed countries like Japan. We're looking at this entire spectrum, right? And we think it's important to think about it in two ways. One is to enable independent living, which is a narrative that we've heard about for many years.
And what we would like to propose is that these be expanded. And these centers, what they help with is they provide support with the idea of active aging.